I want you to think about your most recent watercolor and see if there are any areas that may look somewhat flat, maybe lacking visual interest or sense of depth. If you could revisit this work again, and I know I have a few recent paintings that I would love to redo, like this one, do you feel like you would add additional pigments to your palette now that you see the final result? So one of the most frequent watercolor questions I get is how I choose my colors. Specifically, you want to know how I make my birds and flowers so vibrant and how I decide on specific color variations within the same color family without making it look flat and unrealistic. So for example, different shades of violet on this flower or different variations of blue on bird feathers to give it that extra dimension. There's definitely a method to this. It has to do with how light affects the subject, and it actually doesn't require you seeing these variations instantly. Our eyes are not really designed for that. We tend to capture the overall effect of color, hence the name Blue Jay, but rather it requires noticing the shape of the object and its position relative to light. I often refer to this principle in my Skillshare classes using this diagram, but before I show you exactly what it means and how I do it, I wanted to make sure that we have a shared definition of color and the role it plays not just in art but in everyday life. Coincidentally, I just listened to famous American astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson explain color science in one of his recent podcasts, and he defined color as information we receive about an object from a distance. I thought this is quite elegant and really explains what I try to capture in this diagram that has to do with painting and color choices. So if we agree that color is actually a signal, a way of communicating something about an object based on how light illuminates it, it becomes quite obvious that a 3D object in space will have different parts, different angles that are positioned at different distance from our eyes. Therefore, those different parts of an object will have slightly different variations of the same color. For example, this bird is mostly yellow at the bottom, but the chest sticks out the most and is closest to our eyes. This area right here, on the other hand, is further away. If you paint the entire area of the belly and the chest yellow without any variation in color and value, it will look flat. We will need to apply different shades of yellow on different parts of the bird. I hope you're with me so far. So let's look at another example. This pink hydrangea from my latest Skillshare class is illuminated from the top right. Using warmer shades of pink is appropriate right here, and I used quinacridone coral from Daniel Smith. But as we move down, cooler shades of pink like quinacridone magenta and even quinacridone violet and purple are more appropriate. I hope you noticed that in both examples, I start with a base color and then I move up and down or left and right along the color spectrum to find cooler and warmer variations of my base color. That's it. That's how I extend my palette. For any base color, in other words, the dominant color you see on the subject or a portion of the subject, you can move along the spectrum towards cooler colors, usually blues, to get a variation for parts of the subject that are further away from you. And you can also move up towards warmer colors to get a highlight, to bring a particular area towards you visually, and also towards anyone who will be looking at your painting. That's how we create a sense of three-dimensional shape on paper, which is two-dimensional, using our pigments. Of course, there's a lot more nuance once we get into a particular painting with additional factors like shadows and reflections that may further affect your pigment selection, but the essence of this process is always the same. Observing the light, picking your base color, the first one you think of immediately as you look at the subject, and extending it to warm and cold versions of that pigment until you have at least 2 or 3 to play with. With this in mind, think again of your recent painting. What colors would you choose if you had to do it again? Would you add anything new? Hope this gives you something to think about and experiment with. I will see you next week with a colorful parrot tutorial. Thank you for watching. Have a great week ahead.